Hi everyone, in today's video we'll be talking about advanced prompt engineering for ChatGPT that is guaranteed to give you a quality response. The video has 3 parts. In the first part, I will be talking about the importance of asking the right question and how to do it. In the second part, I will be providing you a general formula that is guaranteed to give you a quality response from ChatGPT. And in the last part, I will be sharing experience on the best practice for using ChatGPT. So feel free to jump to chapter 2 for the general formula, or stay with me and let me walk you over the process of getting right question, because sometimes the process is more important than the result. So let's go. Now, let's first look at why asking questions is really important. And let's look at the scenario without ChatGPT. For me, there are 3 reasons. Number 1, asking the right question will help us to define the problem. A lot of times we couldn't find an answer to a problem. That's not because we don't have the capability, but rather we don't understand the problem enough. Asking the right question will help us to understand the problem, such as what is the issue or challenge need to be solved, and what would be the ideal outcome of solving the problem. And lastly, what are some of the constraints or context surrounding the problem, because there are things we can do and there are things we cannot. Number 2, asking the right question will help us to find the right solution. A well-formulated question will increase the chance of addressing the problem and deliver the target solution. Now, number 3, in the context of having a conversation, asking questions is very valuable for audience engagement. You can either prompt the interest from the audience, or you can create a knowledge gap, which can be valuable for effective storytelling. When you ask the questions, you want to go to the right person. If you are sick, you will probably approach to your doctor to ask for advice, while if you need legal advice, you will go to a lawyer. You probably wouldn't do it the other way, because you need to ask a relevant question to the relevant person. Let me take you away for a couple of seconds and bring you right back. There is a Hindu god called Brahma, and he has 4 heads, one facing each direction, and he's a god that is seeing all and know all. Now back to ChatGPT. ChatGPT has been trained with collective knowledge of human civilization up to 2021. And that makes ChatGPT much smarter than an average person, and in some fashion, almost a semi-god. Now, when you ask a question to ChatGPT, do you wish it to use all the knowledge it has to answer the question, or only the relevant ones? The answer is apparent. You probably only need the relevant perspective. So when you need medical advice, you want it to act like a doctor, while if you need legal advice, you want it to act like a lawyer. So it's very important to assign a persona to ChatGPT to make sure it's wearing the right hat when answering your question. Many people told me they like using ChatGPT, but then have to go back and forth for many rounds to get a satisfactory answer. Now, I will share with you a general formula that is guaranteed to give you high quality response. Basically, you want to frame your question in a fashion to make sure ChatGPT understands everything you need. Now let's look at the formula. Basically, first you want to specify a role for ChatGPT. So I want you to act as a lawyer, doctor, or some sort of expert. And now you need to tell him what type of tasks you are performing, and also provide some relevant context so you can specify all of them here. In the end, you can also add some system level boundaries. Next, you want to break down the tasks into individual requirements and then specify them one by one. And lastly, you can add some task level boundaries. So don't worry about you don't understand system level boundary or task level boundary. Those just some sort of constraints applied to the description to make it more clear to ChatGPT. And we can see that from the examples. First example, Suppose you are organizing a data science webinar and you want to have ChatGPT do some work for you. The first thing you need to do is specify a role for ChatGPT, and that will be an expert data science webinar organizer with expertise in artificial intelligence, data science, etc. Now you need to describe the task. The task is you want to create a webinar landing page on the website, and you also want to specify some context, such as the topic of the webinar will be generative AI applications for enterprise organizations. And now I also added a system level boundary, which is to follow my instructions closely and do not deviate from that. Next, you want to break down the text into individual requirements. So there are two pieces of work need to be done. First, write a professional title, and then also write an abstract for the webinar. And you can also specify some of the details. And in the end, you can also add some text level boundaries, such as I want to limit the number of words to 150 to 200, and also use a very professional tone, something like Mackenzie. Now let's test it out. Let me copy paste this into ChatGPT. The title looks pretty good. So in the abstract is first defining why artificial intelligence is really important. In the second part of abstract is describing why we are doing this and what are the benefits. Overall, I think ChatGPT did a really good job. I think I can just copy paste this into a web page and use it. And of course, you can test it out with ChatGPT yourself. Now let's look at the second example here. And the work is to review some sort of a legal contract. And then first you want to ask ChatGPT to act as a commercial realty lawyer, and this is a role. And then the work or the task is to review the legal contract and explain that to me in a plain language. Next, you can provide some context, and this is gonna be a commercial realty lease in your city. This is the section about insurance coverage, and property is 600 square feet, and I want to use it to open an ice cream shop. So please explain in plain language. And in the end, I also added system level boundary because ChatGPT sometimes will make things up, so do not fabricate things you don't know. And then the next sentence is just a quote of the legal contract regarding the insurance coverage. Some of the numbers seems to be pretty daunting. And next, we can provide some individual requirements. One piece of work is to provide a step-by-step explanation for the clauses and also point out things that are out of norm or potential legal pitfalls. And in the end, we can add a text level boundary such as to avoid legal jargons. Now let me open up a new thread and copy paste the prompt. Now let's look at the response by ChatGPT. Overall, I think it did a pretty decent job. It was going through it line by line to explain each of the clause, such as for the insurance coverage. Most importantly, it was able to point out something out of the norm. The coverage limits in the contract is really high. Some of the insurance limits are like $5 million, and this is absolutely out of the norm for a small property like this one. And I talked to a realty attorney. He was saying pretty much the same thing. In addition to the examples that I provided, I also found something useful online, and it contains hundreds of examples, so check it out in the description. In addition to the general formula that I provided, I also want to share some best practice tips. So number one, you want to state your objective very clearly and precisely. Doing so will help ChatGPT to understand the specific goal you want to achieve. And number two, create a well-structured question, and this is especially true for complex problems. You need to first break it down into smaller parts and then feed ChatGPT one by one. Sometimes you don't need to feed ChatGPT everything, but rather first create a baseline. And now if you're happy with the result, then you can feed in the rest of the tests one by one. And lastly, there are a lot of changes happening every day with the model, so make sure you're staying up to date and understanding what new capabilities are coming up. Well, there are also things you shouldn't do with ChatGPT. And number one, you should never trust the response by the face value, because ChatGPT will hallucinate from time to time and give you fabricated data. And number two, if you're working in a company, you should never leak any confidential or proprietary information to ChatGPT. And there was an incident at Samsung which led to pretty bad things. Thank you for watching the video today. If you liked the video, please subscribe, and if you have questions, please leave a comment.